So much right now.
If you told me that at the beginning, we would have understood each other. Does anyone know if we're supposed to start yet, or should we just hang out?
I think go for it, Joe.
Okay, let's get the hugs over with. Great. Well, thank you all for coming. My name is Joe Confine. I'm a senior director of the HuffPost or something like that. I've been in the field of sustainability for the last 25 years, trying to communicate this, first at The Guardian and now at the HuffPost, so I know how difficult it is. This session focuses particularly on young people, so I'm glad I'm the facilitator, not have to say anything, because I think I'm the oldest person in the room. So I don't know if I have anything useful to say. But it's a quick fire session because we haven't got that long and we've got a big panel. So what I want to do first of all is quickly get in one sentence to say your name and what you do, what you want to say about yourself, and then we'll kick off straight away. So I need to start.
Great. Thank you so much, and thank you to the Climate Group. My name is Miranda, Massie. I direct the Climate Museum, which was to inspire action on the climate crisis with interdisciplinary programming to build connections among people, deepen understanding, and push for just solutions.
Great. Chuck.
My name is Chuck Nice. I'm a stand-up comedian. I tell dick jokes. No, I'm joking. And look at you, Pete. Oh my God!
Am I in the right place?
Am I in the right? Is this the right talk? Thank you. No, I'm the founder of a campaign called Shh, It's Real. And if you collapse it, you get the message. And what we're trying to do is communicate climate specifically through entertainment.
My name is Marissa Hatch. I am on the Strategic Partnerships team at Global Citizen, and I manage our partnership with Climate Week. So Global Citizen is a movement of engaged citizens working to end extreme poverty by 2030. And 52% of our base are millennials, so they're very relevant to our movement. So I'm excited to talk more about that today.
Great.
Thank you. My name's Jeremy Jauncey. I'm the founder and CEO of a business called Beautiful Destinations. We are the largest tourism community in the world on social media. Almost 25 million people in 180 countries come to us every single day on Instagram, Facebook, Snapchat, YouTube, Weibo in China to be inspired about travel and tourism. And the core of everything that we do is a very passionate belief that A, travel is a force for good. It is a universal language that connects people regardless of age, gender, income, sexuality, religious preference. It really is a uniting force. And B, the core of it has got to be sustainable. And we've got to focus on stories and messaging and a positive focus around how we look at climate. And obviously all of our community are young millennials. So
Well, that was in one sentence, but it was a long sentence.
Well,
so
I
thank you.
apologise.
So welcome all. Just say, because we haven't got much time, I don't want to ask each question to each of you. I think wherever the energy is, just jump in and say what you want to say. But my first question is, with the climate strikes, it looks as though all young people are suddenly very engaged. But I just want to challenge the premise of that, whether actually we are genuinely seeing so many young people engaged, or actually is it just a small vocal minority, and actually there are enormous amount of young people who are disengaged, disempowered, not involved, not really knowing what's going on, hiding behind the scenes in entertainment and all the rest of it. Chuck.
Yes. No, without a doubt, that's exactly what I think and what I've anecdotally found to be the case. Don't have scientific empirical proof to back it up, but I did a little experiment where I took pictures out onto the street, okay, and I took out 4 pictures. One was a white-haired woman and a dragon. The second were zombies. The third was a middle-aged guy holding a beaker with a young guy in a lab, okay? So I'm just going to ask in the room. The first one would be? Thank you. The second one would be? Zombies? Thank you. The third one would be? Okay, without even seeing the imagery, you knew exactly what those things were. Every person on the street got it 100% correct what those 3 pictures were, whether they watched the shows or not. And then the fourth thing I put up was just a white card and black numbers, 415 ppm. Guess how many people got that? Guess. 0. Thank you. There you go. That's what I'm saying. That's where we are right now. Sorry, anybody else? I took up too much time.
I will say somewhat in favor. So we were also at the climate strike and we were speaking to young people, and I know that there's a sense of trying to fight apathy in the sense that this is an urgent matter and that there's no time to waste. And when we were speaking to young people, we were pleasantly surprised to hear that they did feel that urgency, and they were saying that climate change is here and now, and that it's affecting the world's most vulnerable, which is through the lens that we work, is focusing on ending extreme poverty and addressing and serving those most vulnerable. So that was a bit of a glimmer of hope in terms of the conversations we were having and what we were hearing.
I mean, I think I would absolutely support that. I don't think for a minute that there's a small minority that is more vocal. I think the main and the fundamental change we've seen now is that people no longer rely on a hierarchical media to get out messaging. And messaging is coming from people that have the ability to tell any stories that they want. And so if you look on social media, you will see that that is a large part of the discussion. If you look at examples like the Amazon, over and over again, the mainstream media did not report on the Amazon. We know it took 2.5 weeks before the mainstream media picked up that story, and really the torch paper that got things going was high-profile people on social media that weren't mainstream media starting that discussion. So I think the most exciting thing is the way that communication has changed and the opportunity that we all have to embrace that. So I would maybe counter that it's a small vocal minority only.
Of course it's a small minority. It's a small minority of adults. We need to grow the number of people who are talking and thinking about and taking action on climate. There's no question about that. But what we're seeing is a new phenomenon that has flipped a switch and is changing the dialogue. And that's what matters. Last Friday was the largest demonstration our species has ever had on a working day. So that tells you something about what a small vocal minority can do.
Great. So my next question is about hope and despair. So when I woke up this morning, I saw the IPCC report on the oceans, and I sort of read it, and I thought, oh my God, I'm not sure I can take much more of this, and so we know that actually we need to tell people what the truth is of what's going on, and we also know that we have to offer people hope and real hope, but also there's a real mental illness that is growing around climate, and this idea of powerlessness, and actually there's so many problems at such a large scale and we're doing so little about it that actually, is there any hope? So what I want to ask is, how do we communicate, particularly with young people, around getting this message in a way that actually is nuanced?
I can maybe start there. We do have a lot of experience in that. The first is to understand the platforms that people use to communicate on nowadays. And so you think about what's going to happen in the coming week. Some incredibly powerful people, the leaders of the world, are going to convene, are going to talk about how they're going to change the world. And the output of that will be a 400-page written document or a prospectus that's circulated amongst a small group of individuals. That is not how young people communicate with each other nowadays. They are on mobile, they are on messaging platforms, they're on social media. In fact, all of you guys in the room, regardless of your age, are also on those platforms. So the simplest thing is to just start communicating in a way that is made for those platforms, giving out those messages. And I think, we know what we need to do when it comes to climate change. Like, it's not that it's not there, it's translating that message into the platforms that people spend their time, and that's where I think you can have impact.
Who else?
The greatest antidote to that feeling of distress and anxiety and isolation is action with other people.
I agree with both of those wholeheartedly, and I think that taking the fight to where it needs to happen is finding the communication vehicles and messaging there, which means that the power structure has to be a little bit more adept at getting the message down to what we consider to be social media. People still don't take it as seriously as I think you should, because, I mean, you said it, everybody's on it. And young people aren't on the other mediums. See, that's the real difference. They're not watching TV the way, you might think. They certainly don't listen to the radio. And so, how do you get those messages there? And, this is the importance, as I feel, of entertainment. Because, if you want to market anything, if you're entertained, you are paying attention, whether you think you're paying attention or not. And that's neurologically proven. Thank you.
Marissa?
So at Global Citizen, we publish 300 content pieces a month. So we do a lot of that work of distilling those big reports into bite-sized sort of tools that young people can use to understand. So if a young person Googles climate change and sea level rising or forest fires, we try to distill that information and provide them with tools that can help them connect the dots in a way that's relevant to them and clear and direct.
Marissa, just one thing I really want to get to is that, and which is going to come up in the second section as well, which is that it's great to get people to take an action, but often neurologically, if you take an action, you can think the problem is solved. Yeah. So we have this thing where we are getting increasingly an understanding that we need to think systemically, that we need to see the interconnectedness of everything and understand how we respond. But that is very complex to understand that system and to know the intervention points. And yet with young people, they just want to say, I want one thing, just give me one thing to do. Mm-hmm. But as soon as you get one thing to do and you think you've done it, then you can think you've solved the problem. So how do we deal with that complexity and nuance?
Yeah, I mean, we're constantly trying to figure out how to keep young people engaged and in the funnel. And so through things like content and video, we also, in addition to sort of distilling, scary, facts, we also create videos that create glimmers of hope. So we try to show examples of young people who are, have intervened and are actually developing solutions. So I think for us, the various touch points for us are content, video, of course, social, and then the large-scale events that we have. And so we're constantly trying to keep them within that cycle to continue to learn more and to understand how to be an engaged citizen continuously.
And just to follow up with that, I mean, one of the things people judge some young people have is that their attention span, that with all this stuff going on, the attention spans are narrowing at a time where actually to understand these issues and really respond to them takes a lot of reflective time and a lot of understanding and investigation. How do you marry those two, which seem to be in contradiction?
So I will say for our content, we actually have one of the longest page views, about 3 minutes. So we are able to, through our work of distilling the information into a way that is understandable in terms of what is the problem, how can I intervene, what is a possible solution, we are actually able to see that we do have much longer sort of engagement time in terms of the content and the information that we distill. So I think if you do it right, you're able to sort of combat that, and I think that we see that in the terms of the engagement that we have, that we've figured out a sort of formula and it works to keep young people paying attention.
Okay, and Miranda, same thing. So you're running a museum that's seeking to raise awareness. How are you doing that in a way that actually helps me to really understand what's going on as opposed to just have a quick response?
Well, I'll talk specifically about our youth-focused arts programming, because that's a big strand and that's particularly pertinent to this panel. And we've found that if you give members of this very young generation the smallest amount of elbow room and the smallest amount of support and mentorship, their leadership and thoughtfulness and creativity and compassion explosively enter that space. And it's not on a mass scale. It's a more boutique model, I suppose. It's in no way a scientific sampling of young people today. But the wisdom that resides in this generation is really important not to underestimate. And we've had young people who knew nothing about climate, nothing about poetry, and nothing about public performance stand and deliver beautiful spoken word pieces on the stage of the Apollo Theater with a scanty 2 months of support from us. So I think that it's of course true that we're all devolving into character limits in a certain sense, on the one hand. On the other hand, what we've seen is evidence that in the youngest generation now coming into political action, there's a remarkable capacity for thoughtfulness, again, compassion, and intelligent engagement with this crisis.
Great. Chuck, anything to add?
I just think that if you look at... There you go. Thank you. I think if you look at this current generation and the way they have changed the conversation around social issues, I think you can see the power of what happens when they feel empowered. So this is what this is about. I mean, we are social creatures, and I'm not going to say this properly, but I don't want to get all like, in the weeds of brain science, but we are very much motivated by the shame of not being on the right side of something. And so, for instance, when you look at gender issues and the way young people have handled gender issues and the power that came out of that movement, the same thing can happen with climate. And the only thing I can relate it to is I was here when people used to let their dogs poop on the street in New York. And that was not cool, man. It was just not cool. And then all of a sudden, we had two things happen. You had policy come into place, but the policy came about because people were like, yo, this is not cool. And then those two things came together. And now, if you let your dog poop on the street in New York, you don't have to worry about getting a ticket. You might get punched. So that's what I'm talking about.
Let's talk about politics for a moment. Is there a danger that the youth movement will be sort of co-opted? So in a sense, at the beginning of this week, we had sort of leaders saying, the young people are telling us what to do, and then almost using them, and then Trump saying, oh, they're just young people, sort of pat them on the head. Do you think the power structures are changing in terms of the power that young people have to really create change over the long term?
I'm just thinking of Greta as an example in the sense that she is one of our, when we create content around her, she's one of our obviously top performing, sort of models, mentors for young people. But I think she's providing an example that you can speak truth to power without sort of, the sort of consequences that we would typically see. And so she's a great mentor and model in that sense that young people can fight for exactly what they want and not take no for an answer or be co-opted or manipulated.
Anyone else on whether the power dynamic is changing between young people and the sort of established system? What the power is of young people to sort of reshape the status quo?
I really don't want to say what I really mean, but I can't help myself. So, because that's what happens when you're a comedian. You just don't have a filter. So here's the deal: young people don't have power. Okay, let's stop fooling ourselves. Young people don't vote because they can't vote. Okay, so the great thing is that people like Greta and people like Miranda and Marissa, they're preparing young people to have that power, which is primarily voting right now if you're living in a democracy. Young people don't have the financial capabilities that we have. They can't really vote with their pocketbook the way we can. Young people don't have the influence over those who make the laws. That means not just voting, but applying pressure on people who are already in office, right? Guess where that power is? It's us. So, I mean, the truth is, no, they're not changing the power structure. And let me just say this last thing, because here's why they're not changing the power structure. And I tell people this all the time. At $63 a barrel, which is kind of a conservative figure, there's $107 trillion worth of money in the ground to dig up and burn. Everybody thinks that this is cool to talk about yeah, we're doing something. You're not doing anything. If you think those people aren't going to dig up that crap and burn it and get their $107 trillion, you are sadly mistaken, okay? Sadly.
I just want to weigh in as being sadly mistaken because I think...
No, I don't mean it's going to happen. What I'm saying is if you are complacent, they are never going to be complacent. They're never going to quit. That's what I'm saying.
I definitely agree with that. And what I see in this new generation of youth leaders is the beginnings of a real understanding. What I see amongst all of us is the beginnings of a real understanding that we are in the fight not only of our lives, but of the life of the human species. Yes. And there is no way that this is going to be quick or easy for anyone, including the young people. But I definitely would contest the view that they don't have power in the sense of having massive influence, because if you had told anybody in this room a year ago, it's my guess that every contender for the Democratic nomination for president would have to announce her or himself on a massive climate and jobs works program. We would have been laughed out of the room, right? We would have laughed that person out of the room. That is on the table because of young people, period.
Does anyone in the audience want to challenge Chuck on that view about whether young people have power or not? Great. Let's just... Let's all challenge Chuck. What fun.
I'm like a movie 300. Bring it on.
Say who you are and where you're from.
Okay. So my name is Jauncey Ritchie. I work for International Copper Association, and I support all of their digital advocacy work. So I guess my discussion antidote question is, on the one hand, you're right. We're not in the C-suite level. We're still considered not finished. We're still considered not the true decision makers, right? We still have to fight and elbow our way in for our CEO to care. But on the other hand, we also, I think, as a generation, or as younger people, as I often have to joke and say in my company, as speaking for the younger generations, when we do have a moment where you get that, oh, you've been here sitting in the room quietly for 5 years, what do you think? What do you say then? And I think at that point we do have power and we do have influence, because at that time we have learned how to be an influencer on social media. We have learned how to have our research. So when we get that opportunity, then we really run with it. But it's 50-50. In the one hand, we kind of got to get rid of that old mentality of, you're not in the room, so you're not a decision maker and your voice doesn't matter. And on the other hand, we as a generation are saying, so what if we're not in the room? We're going to get our way in.
Great. Thank you. Yes.
Hi, everyone. This is Emily from Climate Communicators. This was more about what you said about co-opting the sort of the movement, the youth movement. I don't know if I would go with the word co-opting, because if we learn anything from Greta's speech, it's that we don't want to be doing this, and that we shouldn't be worrying about our future this way. We shouldn't be stepping up where adults are failing us. So I would maybe think of another word possibly, because I would love for adults to take over. I honestly would love to just worry about my studies and find a job that doesn't have to do with climate change, and so maybe we could think of another word, or you can challenge me on that as well.
I'm not going to challenge you on anything. Any other perspectives on that? No. Okay. So I just want, and then one more question, then we'll open it up for general questions. In terms of, I'm just interested in what you find is the most effective way. What are the breakthrough moments that you think, just on a practical way, about how to reach young people? What it is they're looking for? What it is that helps them to feel connected and to take action? And Marissa, maybe you should start because you're so deeply involved. But it'd just be good to have some sort of practical tips from everyone.
Yeah, so I think for us, the three things that we we have successfully done in appealing to young people is to make it relevant, to create clear steps on how they can get involved, and then also to show that what they've done is having impact. So we have developed a sort of pop-in policy model where we have large-scale music events where you can, we give away 40,000 free tickets, so you have to take action to be able to get tickets to our concert. We have our big concert is coming up on Saturday in Central Park. And so in that sense, we sort of merge these two worlds that young people might want to be a part of separately and bring them together. And so, yeah, so in that sort of sense, making it relevant, and then we create clear actions on our site for young people to get involved in this movement towards ending extreme poverty. And of course, poverty and climate change are inextricably linked. And then we have in-depth impact where we track all the commitments made on our stage to show that young people that their actions are delivering and lives are being affected.
Great. Well, can I just challenge you on one thing? So I attended the concert in Central Park, I think 2 years ago, and each time one of the music sets finished, and someone came on stage to talk about the real issue that was there today, I saw everyone just disappear off to the beer tent, and or go to the toilet, or do everything. And so, you know, isn't there a danger that actually people sign up for things actually not because they think the world really is in danger, because that still seems a bit far away, but actually because they want to go and see the music? So I'm just wondering how you manage that.
Yeah, so I will say, of course, we obviously have people who come. Just at my first festival, I went to the first Global Citizen Festival as a guest in 2014. Don't quote me on that. It might have been 2012. Yeah, this year's our 10-year anniversary. So, so of course, I think there is that danger that we're just bringing people in because they want to see a concert, but there is also the upside that we are potentially bringing someone in just because they want to see a concert, and therefore then they get more involved in the movement. So there is the flip side, and so throughout the event, we are having opportunities where we're getting people to actually take action throughout the concert, all of that. So we're trying to keep them within the funnel, but it's definitely something that we struggle with, is to not just have one single action taken and to keep that like monthly engaged users.
Great, thanks. Jeremy, practical advice.
Well, I mean, I think one of the easiest things to understand is that there isn't actually a lot that adults need to do. Like, it's happening already. Like, a lot of the things that have happened and made the media have come from young people just doing it on their own and having the technology and the tools to bring their voices to light. And so I think I would love for this discussion to evolve into not an adults versus young people, because ultimately it doesn't matter. What really matters is that we save the environment. And so whether it's coming from a young Swedish girl who just happens to find a voice that we can all relate to and then be the face of youth, or whether it comes from the leader of a government, we should all be driving for the same thing. I think it's also incredibly exciting and empowering to know how easy it is to get a message out to the world about something that you care about, and if that message really does resonate, that it can then resonate with hundreds of thousands and then millions of people. Because if we look at the school strikes that have been happening, they're independently organised and run and started. They weren't started by government. They weren't started by a traditional, formal adult structure. And I think that can continue to go. And I think if we continue to support and encourage that by giving platforms to people to talk like we are now, then it'll only continue to grow.
Great. Chuck and then Miranda.
I think that, first of all, I agree with everything that has been said, including what you guys said for the pushback against me. This is a nuanced discussion, and, you know, I'm pretty flexible. So I think that what you have to do is find many, many avenues to make the issue a point of contact. So not everybody is going to have the same point of contact. What causes action is engagement, and that differs for everyone. And I certainly agree with there's no young Earth and old Earth. You know, so that I mean, there's no young climate and old climate. So we're all, you know, and I just think it's an all hands problem. And as long as we find those points of contact for everyone involved, because every one of us has to be an activist in order to make this thing happen.
Yeah, totally agreed. I mean, I would just say it's the golden rule. Young people want to be treated with respect, just like everybody in this room does. And everybody in this room who's not young was once young, unless you're the product of some very unusual and perverse scientific experiment.
Just to check, is there anyone here
who doesn't have a navel?
Right, yeah. And so Dumbledore makes this point in book 6 or book 7, that he was young once, and he should have known better. He's having a heart-to-heart with Harry Potter about something. So think back to when you were 16 or 25 or whatever a young person means to you. You were super smart. You knew a lot of things. There are some things you know now that you didn't know then, and that you couldn't have known then that you didn't know then, and that you were going to learn. But there are also some ways in which you had not yet adapted to the world as it is and to business as usual. We're an incredibly adaptive species, and that is hurting us now. And one of the things that the youth movement is giving us that we weren't able, the older generation, to come up with ourselves is an absolute refusal to regard business as usual as acceptable. We need that energy.
And we'll deal with that in I see I've got one more minute before I'm supposed to open it up for questions. So I'm going to slip in a very quick question, which is around equity and around where is the distribution of young people who are involved? So are there lots of young people in certain either demographic areas or in, within different sort of structures of society that you feel are excluded from this process of being involved? Is it just middle-class kids who are well-educated who won't get involved? Or do you actually think that the youth movement is right across the board? Are there people being left out? Anyone have any thoughts on that?
Oh, that's me. I think that we tend to believe that there are young people who are not engaged when it comes to the subject because we don't see it. But I'm here to tell you that in pretty much everywhere where somebody is concerned, that concern stretches across every spectrum. I was in Brownsville and I was speaking to some kids and I said, what do you guys think about human caused climate crisis? And one of the kids said, yo man, climate is crazy because the weather is like nuts, yo. And believe it or not, in that statement, he summed up the problem. All right, he separated climate and weather, and climate is what causes weather, and so totally got it, And but I think Maslow's hierarchy of need might have something to do with the question that you asked, and that has to do with what Marissa said in terms of equity in other areas that will evidence itself in equity in action.
Right, and Marissa, just quickly for you, because I imagine you do a lot of analysis on the people who are involved. What are you finding in terms of that analysis? Are there certain countries where it's blank? Are there certain parts of America that it's just pretty blank in terms of engagement? What are the...
I can't say specific for our engagement around environment and climate. I do know for us, we do see that we have, our movement is greatest in the U.S. Well, so our movement, we have 50% global citizens in the U.S. And I would say that we do find that the majority of them are in more populated urban coastal areas. So I would say that we, as an organization, are trying to cut across, but I can't speak to the larger movement.
Okay, but how can you, because this is in terms of reaching, we talk about reaching young people, which suggests all young people are the same, which they're not. How are you going about reaching those young people who are not engaged?
So we, through some of our digital campaigns, so I'll speak to a campaign we had a few years, 2 years ago in 2017. So we do various flyaways for the concert. So we will create Facebook ads. And so we had 2 years ago after Trump was elected, we did a campaign with Green Day, who was performing in the festival that year. So we did a flyaway to get young people and to participate, to join our movement, to enter to win tickets for the festival. And we targeted abroad across the U.S. To get people who are not in our sort of typical group of engaged users. So we do various, and we've worked with environmental organizations where we look at where the exact constituencies of young people that we need to mobilize, and then therefore use digital tools to reach them and to get them into our movement.
Right. Questions? We've got 10 minutes. Yes. And again, just tell us your name and anything else you want to say.
My name is Elsa Özman. I work for the European Climate Foundation. I can't help but notice that we're a 100% native English-speaking panel, and I wanted I mean, do you know what's happening in terms of communicating climate change beyond English-speaking countries and audiences? Are you aware? Do we need to do more? And if so, are your organizations involved in any way?
My name is Saad. I come all the way from the United Arab Emirates, and that's a very, very interesting point, because back home my issue is not the youth. My issue is educating the grown-ups about what's happening, and because our country is pretty much very hot. So the climate change is not really resonating in anyone's brain that it is actually an emergency. And I work for a district cooling company, and the fact that I'm not able to convince people that district cooling is important to reduce energy consumption and to reduce CO2 emissions, that's my problem, is to get them on board. And the kids think, if the grown-ups are not really involved, why in the world would I be? And I want to know, how can we translate the importance that you guys are working here, over there, to people who think that, what am I supposed to do? Go to the Amazon, turn, put down fires? I'm not going to fly all the way there. I'm not going to go to a concert and join a movement of a country that I'm not part of. So it's how do we unify the language? How do we unify the communication strategies across the globe, not just here?
Great, thank you. Marissa, I'll start with you, given you're global citizens, it's in your name?
Yes. So we do, our headquarters here, but we do have offices around the world. So we have office in South Africa, Europe, Australia, Canada. We are actually, it was announced earlier, I think last week, that we will actually, in 2020, we will be doing 5 concerts across 5 continents on the same day. And so we are trying to appeal, or working to appeal to a global audience. So I think for us, we do try to have some things that are uniform and that work across our global platform, but then we also allow our country offices, like our team in Johannesburg, to create things that are actually relevant and cater towards their market and their audience as they know best. So last year, for example, we had a festival in South Africa, and we ended up creating local actions where young people were able to participate in plastic cleanup in the city of Joburg, and actually through getting out, cleaning up the streets, participating, they were able to enter to win tickets for the festival. And that came up from the team there, who recognized that that was a problem, that was a way for people to get involved, and that was actually a sort of direct solution. So I think it's a mix. It's of trying to create a formula that works across and cuts across in a global market, but then also allowing those teams to speak in a relevant way.
But just to speak to that question, is there sort of a hierarchy in the sense that because so many people are English speaking and it's based in the US or Europe, that it's actually tilted in one direction and actually needs to be rebalanced in terms of how we view these issues? Yeah, I'm just talking about the movement of sort of, is it very sort of English speaking, white, rather than actually recognizing the diversity of the movement and engaging people in, whether it's in the United Arab Emirates, was it? UAE, which is where people there will feel disconnected from it being presented to them in a way that doesn't connect to them. I think that's what you're saying.
I'm sorry, but the thing is, it's like a lot of the content online, when it comes to educating the youth, is not directed into these causes. Nothing. So I'm personally connected with something called Pledge to Earth. It's a movement that's happening here and in Bali to help everything around the world. And it's only because I know my friends are from here. But back home, the content online has nothing to do with it.
Yeah. So how do people connect if it doesn't feel relevant? So how do we make it relevant?
I'm sorry. Did you want to do? Okay, very quickly. There's a saying: all politics is local. All climate issues are local too. You first have to show where this is affecting the person in their world. You know, I have a sketch that I put out that it's called Poe the Pissed Off Polar Bear. And Poe is mad because he's being exploited by people who constantly push him out, but don't do anything really for his environment and his issue. And so the idea is, where is climate actually affecting your life where you live? Start there and let people make that connection.
I think there's a few very important things that are very personal to me in the way that we run our business that I think might be able to help. And I think it's practical things that you can focus on when you think about the climate change story. The first is, over the last 20 years, Al Gore, John Kerry, Leonardo DiCaprio, massively influential, successful people have gotten in front of us and spoken about the issues for climate. Now, these guys have made amazing progress in moving things forward, but none of them have created a movement in the way that Greta Thunberg did, right? None of them came anywhere close to what she's been able to unite in people. And even though her approach is very confrontational and very forward and is very much about saying things in the halls of power that aren't traditionally said, I believe that there is an opportunity to slightly change the narrative and focus less on the doom and gloom. We're completely ruined. The world is done. It doesn't help anybody, and it doesn't give us a chance to act. And so I feel very strongly that if we're going to talk about these issues and we're going to inspire people, regardless of where you come from, we do a lot of work in the UAE, the message should be about hope, and it should be about positivity, and it should be storytelling that shows people there is absolutely everything that you can do if you change your mindset. There are so many things that we can do. We know it's very simple. The goal is there. Stop and reduce the warming of the planet to 1.5 degrees. Now, of course, it's very complicated to get there, but actually starting to do things and have impact, I believe, will only come on this issue if we focus on ways of trying to get people motivated and excited through positive storytelling, because otherwise, you know, we're just doing the same thing we've done for so long.
Great. Yes.
So I just thought what you said was really interesting, because
Can you just tell us who you are?
Yeah, sorry, my name is Philip Enkel. I come from energy company called Ørsted, Danish energy company, very focused on offshore wind. And I just thought it was interesting what you said, because isn't what Greta Thunberg is doing, isn't that the opposite?
She's giving hope. She's just the person that has the guts to get up and say what everybody else is thinking. But she's giving hope to people that allows them to realize that we're not completely screwed. And we're not going to rely on a generation of people that have a different mindset. And that, I think, is what's the most important thing, because otherwise we just give up. Like, the message about climate change it's become more urgent recently, and people are now saying we have 15 years, we now have 11 years, we have 10 years. But it's not changing behaviours if we continue focusing on negative storytelling. There has to be a hopeful story in the fact that a young 16-year-old girl is able to get up and unite the whole world. That I feel is where we should spend more of our time.
Can I comment?
Yeah.
So I just think this is extremely interesting and very much on point to the conversation, and so I still think that what Greta Thunberg is doing by large is to talk about the problem really a lot, and not really talk that much about the hope, and so I'm just a bit puzzled in the sense that she's actually managed to build this movement with that communication. Because if you'd asked me like 1 year ago, I would have said that's going to be very difficult. So I don't know if anyone has answers to that, but I just think it's extremely fascinating to see. And I guess my own take on it is that whether you talk hope or sort of more doom and gloom also depends a lot on who you're talking to, the audience, and the level of awareness. Because I'm from Denmark, and people have a pretty high awareness now, so I think you can talk a lot of doom and gloom, actually. People actually connect with that by now. Whereas in countries with a lower awareness, I think you need to talk more about hope to get people sort of on board, and then perhaps you can sort of ramp up the rhetoric. It's a comment, it's a question, it's so key. We are really focusing, so we are doing there's a VR stand towards the end, with sort of you get a virtual reality experience of the world. That's a way for us to try to connect with people and say, you know, we have something extremely precious and beautiful that we need to preserve. That's a bit of a hopeful message, but something that we are thinking a lot about. How do we communicate this as a company?
Yeah, I mean, and I think one of the things is around you communicate differently to each audience. That the idea that there's one way you speak to everyone, so I think you're speaking to that. We've got 3 minutes left. Oh my God, and then we've got another session, so you can still stay here. But quick comment. And then if anyone wants to make a comment, we won't have any more questions, any comments?
Hi, it's me again, Emily. So I have a bit of a solution to that, and I think that we need to start visualizing a carbon neutral future for ourselves, because we don't have anything to work towards right now. And right now we're fearing what we're losing, but we need to look forward to what we're gaining. We need to look at climate change or climate action as an opportunity for a better, more just future. So now we need to see these positive, hopeful narratives in movies, in literature, in more unconventional ways, so that there's something to work towards and not something to run away from.
Great. Any final comments? Yes. Oh my gosh, we're on the other side. Hold on. 3 minutes is going to go just from coming over here. Here we go. Got you and then someone.
Very quickly, I just want to say it's value, your value to society, V2S. That is what we need to shift toward. This is not the audience to talk about money being the problem, but it is the problem. How we count for our behaviors in society. Look up Conscience Land, that's our project, to get SDG tokens to people for their good actions toward solving the SDGs. If we value ourselves in terms of the actions that we take, pay it forward, pass it forward, encourage other people, etc., change diet, etc., then the money is irrelevant. You need it for the infrastructure, but you don't need it to solve the problem. The problem is basically money. Our capitalist system is a problem. We need to be more generous to each other with caring currency.
Great. Thank you.
Hi, my name's Crystal. I'm from Australia. I work for an investor member association that has about $2 trillion in assets, who are concerned about climate change and how it solves their, how it affects their investments. We, like you here, have a conservative government, and I always feel that whenever we're at any kind of climate change event, it's always the same people in the room, and we're never reaching the right audience. So do you have any advice for how we reach, particularly under these conservative governments, how we actually reach those that we need to get the message through to, and how we make it more important than other vested interests?
Well, I'm going to say $2 trillion is a good start.
We have our time up. I know I'm going to be shouted, but let's do a quick answer to that question. Let's go across and then we'll finish.
Take the programming to people where they are in the metaphorical sense, for sure, but also in the physical sense. Do programming in people's neighborhoods. People are incredibly hungry. We've found in our first 2 years as a startup programming in public, people are super hungry for spaces to think and feel on climate and to take action together.
What she said. There you go. It's go find them where they are. Don't wait for people to come. Go get them. Go deliver the music. Go deliver the message to them. Back in the day when we used to have newspapers, somebody threw it up your door every day.
Yeah, I would say create a platform, and then also in terms of if it's world leaders, create people pressure in that sense.
And then specifically, the way you communicate on each of the platforms that are available to you is dramatically different. So the story that you might tell to engage people on YouTube is different to the way you might do it on Facebook, which is different, again, if you're running ads on the New York Times or on CNBC. And it's not rocket science, but it does require a different approach for each platform.
Great. Unfortunately, we need to stop there, but don't move, because we've got the second session coming up in 2 minutes. So if you can be like a politician, you can ask the question you wanted to ask in this session in the next session. So what I want to say, we are going to literally play a 1-minute video in between the session, but don't leave, please. And also for people at the back, during that video, come and you can, there's lots of space over here. But for now, just to say, really, thank you so much to the panel. And great. And as I say, we're going to start again in 1 minute, so there's no comfort breaks, nothing like that. Okay, let's get the video going. Yes. But I'm not sure when. Okay. Yeah.
It's really interesting, actually. In the U.S., I was surprised to keep local voices in the U.S. The youth movement led by young people. That's not to say they'll come out as backwards. They'll at least have access to economic education. But needless to say,
Okay.
This is The Last Talk.
There's a human in my forest, and I don't know what to do. He destroyed all of our trees for your food and your shampoo.
Sister said now, don't you hurt me. I come from the place that
The chain's also installing amnesty bins so old plastic toys can be melted down.
With a cry, oh, not true. You got to give up your heart if you want to. You got to give up your heart if you want to. You got to give up your heart if you want to.
Change is coming, whether you like it or not.
Dan, we're going to carry on now. So let's all settle. Great. Okay, so I'm the same person as I was in the last session, so I don't need to introduce myself again. What we're now talking about is the role of business in terms of driving the change we want to see in the world. So we've got four fantastic panelists. So what I'm going to ask them to do is each introduce themselves in one sentence, what your name is, why this is relevant, why you're here, why you're sitting up here on a very tall chair, and then we'll kick off.
I'm Luke Herbert, Director of International Communications at the Climate Group, and why it's relevant is we're trying to transform the scale of action of businesses. In particular, we do stuff with states as well, but take that to a whole nother level over the next decade, actually over the next few years.
Hi, I'm Nancy Mamana. I'm the Chief Marketing Officer for NYC & Company. We are the official destination marketing organization and CVB for the 5 boroughs of New York City, and we are also proud partners of the Climate Group. Happy to be here. We are dedicated to both visitation and driving the economic prosperity for the boroughs, but that comes along with responsibility, and we obviously care about the sustainable growth of the world, but certainly our 5 boroughs, so we're really happy to be here.
Hey everyone, my name is Carol. I'm Chief Sustainability Officer for GCDECO, and why we are here is because we are a leading company in out-of-home communication, and we are finally a change maker media, meaning that every day in more than 4,000 cities around the world, we're financing, thanks to advertising, new services and innovative solutions for city for free, for no cost for taxpayer. And for instance, we are here for communication, communicating climate change, but communication with GCDECO already tackle climate change, because thanks to advertising campaign, for instance, we are developing bike system, self-bike sharing system in 57 cities around the world, so we are already tackled climate change, but we do a lot of things more, and we will explain in a few minutes.
Thank you.
Hi everyone, my name is Ryan Wilkins. I'm the founder of Raw London. So we're a creative and strategy agency, funnily enough, based in London. So we're helping brands and charities transform the way that they communicate. So we're helping them change perceptions, what people think of them. We're getting them to inspire action and drive change for good.
Great, thank you. So welcome. So I'm going to start with a challenging question, because it's that time of day. So I've been in the field of sort of business and sustainability the last 20 years, and what we've seen is iterative change. But one of the fundamental problems with business is that they suck from the system that is the problem. And so whatever they do, most of the time, there are very, very few businesses that have actually transformed their business models. That actually they're all doing their little bit, and they're doing a bit of change, but actually, fundamentally, they still remain part of the problem rather than the solution. Is that fair or not? Ryan?
Yeah, I think there's quite a bit of, I think one of the biggest threats to business is kind of standing still and inertia. So I think there is a real opportunity actually for businesses to take a stand, especially within their sector. Myself and Luke were talking about the change for good and that drive to do something different and to go out there and be bold and positive can be a real differentiator within a sector or a particular geography. So I think from a communications point of view, there's a huge opportunity.
But But is it not the case that the very capitalist system, the way it's structured, means that companies, even if they want to be, and I see this with lots of CEOs, they would love to be much bolder. They would genuinely love it. They recognize the problem, they realize the scale, they recognize the science, they recognize the time scale, but they are hemmed in by the system that is driving the very thing that they want to change.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree with that. I think a lot of it comes from the boldness and the ability to communicate is tied to, I think, the purpose of the company and how, that trickles down from the senior leadership, the CEO, and what is that brand story. And I think the companies that are going to slightly struggle are the ones that, don't necessarily have that inherent story, that inherent purpose. I'm not saying that if you don't have one, you can't have one, but it's about making that inherent change internally first and being able to communicate that and being confident about communicating that with your stakeholders and your staff before you can then start, being bolder and taking those steps.
Great. Carol, how do you feel about how much movement you can make and how bold you can be and whether that's enough? And how do you actually build that radical edge? How do you actually, when there are all these structures in place to keep things quite as they are, how do you break out of that?
Yeah, definitely we have a strong responsibility and a core responsibility. For instance, as JCDecaux, we reach every day 850 million of people per day. So it's a big influence. It's a big responsibility. How we use our media, our space to encourage, enable people to live a better life, a more sustainable life, encourage positive behaviors. So for instance, maybe you have seen it in the street of New York. We are amplifying, developing a campaign creating awareness regarding climate change with a very famous designer, Per Arnoldi, called Warning Global Warming. And so it's today in New York, and we will be also during the C40 summit in Copenhagen in a couple of weeks. So how we use this influence as a media. But I will say that also that we are lucky to work with the biggest brand around the world. And every brand, and we see with the leadership and the brand today in the Climate Week, have their own sustainability agenda. And they are fully convinced, and they know that today they have to change the content of advertising. I don't know if you know and you're familiar with the study, but Avas are developing a study for more than 10 years now called Meaningful Brands. And there are very key and important figure on that, showing that people saying that 80 brands could disappear in general indifference because the content of advertising don't make an impact, don't feel people, helping them to feel a better life, etc. So we are in a movement where we have to transform the content of advertising, moving from what we call advertising today to good advertising. So really influence a transformation of the contents, which is win-win for the society, for the citizen, which is the citizen consumers, and for the brands. So we do it at all scales, but we have also to influence all the ecosystem of advertising, meaning that it's the brief of the advertisers, how they brief differently the agency, and the creative agency. So it's also a question of competencies, how we will make sustainability, communication, and creativity to create positive and impactful good advertising in the future.
And how do you link, because it's all very well to have good advertising and to have these messages of change or hope, but if it's not, but there's so much cynicism about greenwashing, and actually it's great to have these wonderful adverts, but actually behind the scenes the company is not actually fulfilling that. I mean, how do you connect those two together so that actually it is truly authentic, actually at the operational end as opposed to just the brand end?
So that's right. It's the complex things that when brands want to communicate more, they are criticized, and we talk it's greenwashing. That's why we fully believe in the developing competencies, and again mixing how. My feeling is that when we see the agency, the creative agency, for instance, they are very well, very strong in creativity, but they don't understand the sustainability issues, so they make creative campaign totally out of what we are expecting, and that's why we are falling in greenwashing. So developing competencies, and also, we have to find a way to reassure people and showing that brands and business actors, business players are key actors in the transformation. So that's not an easy topic, but we have to find an alignment. And definitely the brand and the products they develop and the way they are delivering their message have to be fully aligned. We cannot have a strong campaign and have a bad behavior and bad ethics in your company.
Okay, Luke, you wanted to add in, and then we'll come to Nancy.
Yeah, I think your point is half fair, Joe. Well, I think it's half unfair, actually. I think, so I'm going to be challenging back to you. I think that I've actually worked in business before working in an NGO, and I've seen delay and frustration and everything. And, I worked in a car company, and I had a director, my boss's boss, who was saying, like, electric cars, it's rubbish, they're just going to be plugged into coal power stations and so on. But actually within a business, you get a real dynamic. There's lots of different opinions. There's other centers of gravity. In a multinational business, there's as much complex politics there as you actually have in governments, actually. And I also saw that was a business that went from, within 5 years, from 10 people working on hybrid electric vehicles to actually being the core work of an engineering workforce of 5,000 people in that scale, that scale at the time. Orstel is another business which has transformed very, very quickly. So when business gets its mind behind it and it wants to do stuff, it does it far, far quicker than governments actually, and can deliver. This has got money and resource, and there's objectives, and people's performance reviews and bonuses are based upon it. So yeah, people get shit done really quickly when they are incentivized in the right way. And I think that's really the really interesting thing in communications comes is if communications and the public discourse on this can link in a way to the dynamics of business and getting it up the corporate agenda from sometimes, there will be people within the business who are trying to push particular things, but if it can get up to the executive management team, if it can get up on the agenda of the CEO as something they have to happen, maybe because other businesses are doing it and their competitors are doing it and they're seeing the benefits for them in terms of their marketing and their consumer engagement and their ability to attract employees, as we're starting to see evidence of that coming through, then actually that can play to the power dynamic you have within businesses and help this action to happen a lot quicker.
Great, thank you. Nancy.
I also think the point is half fair. We are a membership-based organization. We have over 2,000 businesses across the city that are members of NYC and Company, and that spans across hotels, theaters, restaurants, et cetera, attractions. And I think what we find most frequently is it's not a lack of desire. It's sometimes an education and awareness issue, and perhaps also being overwhelmed with being able to do business here. It can be complicated to do business in New York City. It can be expensive, and trying to help them navigate how to be sustainable can be overwhelming. And we are primarily B2B organization. We do direct to the consumer with programs like Restaurant Week and Broadway Week, which you may know, probably are more aware of that than you are of NYC and Company. But a lot of the program we do is designed to educate our members, inspire them, and connect them so that they learn from each other and understand best practices. So as a restaurateur in New York City, you're doing everything you can to keep the lights on. You might not know how you could be sustainable in a real tangible way. So we actually have an event on Friday, which is, we're very excited. It's an official part of the program for Climate Week, where we are connecting every member sector we have to learn from each other, to understand what is the city doing on a level that will impact them to help them be more sustainable. What can they learn from each other? And that's our role. We are not out. We don't have a storefront. We are not impacting the economy directly, but we are interested in doing whatever we can to support the businesses in New York City and to do what's right by the city. So any way that we can help impact that through servicing the members. We don't see a lack of willingness. We see sometimes they need better education and whatever we can do to help them.
Okay, thank you. In terms of communication and marketing, so let's just take plastics as an example. So I was speaking to someone at one of the big agencies, and they were saying every company, 80% of the briefs that are now coming in are around plastics. So everyone wants to jump on the bandwagon, and there's the risk that, as soon as you focus on one thing, you say, if you just don't use a single-use bottle for your water or whatever. And we discussed at the last session a bit about people in their mind, they think, oh, it's all about plastic. If we solve plastics, then the whole world is saved. And everyone piles in because they think, oh, that's the issue people care about, therefore we'll pile in. We'll make this our year where we're going to talk about how we're reducing plastic, and we're going to put this into our marketing. We're going to say we're going to produce one shampoo bottle from ocean plastics or one this, and actually rather than lead something, it becomes something that can be actually can be backward and it can harm press. So, any thoughts around, and I'll start with you, Luke, about how we manage complexity in communications? That with the advert or with the marketing, you want to pick one thing and make it really beautiful and clear, but actually people think, oh, if I do that, world saved.
Yeah, we've been doing some thinking about this actually, because I mean, Climate Week is, it's fantastic. There's 350 events, but there's so much going on, and so how do you get the bandwidth in that? And I think really it's beholden on us in terms of it's to us as an NGO about how we push this. We've been doing this thing, we've been talking this week, starting to talk about the climate decade, the 10 years to come, the scale of action that has to happen. And I think we're increasingly thinking that we need to sort of break it down in terms of if you look at what needs to happen over those 10 years, it's actually pretty clear. Renewables are out there, they're delivering at cost, they're all cheaper. So that has to just grow in scale and pace a lot more quickly. So how do we simplify that down? And we actually asked young people in the US, 1,000 young people, it was published last week, what's your expectation of business? And 80% of young people in the US, Gen Z, said, we expect big business to be 100% clean powered. So simplifying it to that, about is this business clean powered or not? And obviously that links with our RE100 campaign, where you've got 200 businesses just now have joined. We'd like that to be much, much bigger, in the next few years, and it needs to be to do that. So I think we as NGOs have to be careful to just jump on the bandwagon of these things, because then we take bandwidth away from other places. But we need to link those existential problems of climate change and net zero targets and things like that into very specific things that we wish to see businesses lead on. And I think that way we can influence it and give the space. And we see that with AB InBev, with Budweiser being 100% renewably made, with renewable power. IKEA with the sort of heroic stuff they're doing on electric vehicles. They're taking 5 global megacities to 100% electric last mile delivery by the end of next year. And they've already done Shanghai. That's real leadership, and they're using that as a marketing campaign, just as AB InBev is doing with their renewable power. So I think there is space there. I would say actually, if you're in corporate marketing and so on, if everybody else is going on it, then you may feel you have to do it. You're not going to get a lot of pickup. There's so much to do. You can find your space, you can find your area where you can lead on, and you'll get a lot more attention for it.
Okay. Carol, do you want to talk about that, sort of how you get that balance right of helping people to understand the breadth of the problem, but also get them to take action, and how you manage that?
Just want to answer with a very recent experience, meaning that it's really the holistic picture which counts, meaning that we have big FMCG companies which are part of our clients, so offering and collaborating with JCDecaux to push their campaign and advertising messages. And now they come to see us as a service provider. You were talking about the plastic issues and how we help people and contribute to make people more recycling, the good waste sorting behavior, etc. And now the big brand come to see us and say, okay, we have a sustainability agenda. We want to be world without waste in 2020 or 2022. Of course, we can make a big campaign, a big movement regarding helping people to make the right behavior, but we need equipment. We need garbage in the cities. And it's quite interesting to say that you can have a massive and amazing campaign and communication to change behavior if you don't have the infrastructures. And that's we have a very at a very specific point at JCDecaux to see these kind of things, and that we have to push the holistic picture and, of course, invest in infrastructures. So, for instance, we are developing a pilot project in France in Paris specifically, and in other cities, to have more garbage in the street and financed by advertising, to make sure that when you say people, you have to sort your waste, you can do it. And it's not just a call to action, but you have concrete infrastructure to do it. So I don't really directly answer your question, but it was just highlighting about what we do.
Thank you. Ryan, fine if you answer that question, but also within that, what I'd like to ask you is, what are the mistakes you see companies making most in terms of communicating, and what are the ones that are getting it right, and why are they getting it right?
I think the key one is there's a tendency for charities, our charity clients and brand clients to, there's a temptation to talk about yourself. So communicating outwards, and I think, especially around climate and these kind of subjects, they have a tendency to be quite scientific, sometimes quite complex. So there's a tendency sometimes to talk in quite complicated terms, but I think the good communicators and the good clients that we have really understand that it's almost thinking about like the communications as almost like a Venn diagram. So you've got what you want to talk about on one side, but the guys earlier were talking about just really understanding how that is going to be relevant to the people you're talking to, be that a millennial or a consumer. So what you want to talk about, consider what they want to hear, but also bringing in kind of your brand purpose. And if you can hit the middle of that Venn sort of diagram, that middle bit, that's when you really hit the gold, and that's when it resonates and you're getting your message across and people understand it and it's relevant to them in their geography or to their lives.
And if you were to pick one example of a company that you really feel has got it right, but not necessarily the Patagonias or the REIs, but the ones that, the big corporations that are really, held tight in the system, but are trying to do more and communicate effectively, who would you pick on and why?
I mean, it's easy to say kind of one of the Unilever brands because they do it so well and they've always been the kind of benchmark for this kind of thing. One brand that I thought did really well that kind of wasn't necessarily such an obvious choice was Lacoste. So earlier this year they did a tie-up with WWF around endangered species, and they launched a range of clothes. I thought it was fascinating. It was a really cool execution as well, where they basically released a series of T-shirts where they changed their traditional brand crocodile into icons of these endangered species, and I just thought that was a really brave thing to do for a brand that's not often kind of or traditionally involved in that conversation, to take such a risk with their brand mark, their main brand mark. But I think it just it landed really well and it resonated with a lot of people, and it did really well. So.
And is there anyone you would pick on that you thought was like, oh my God, how did they come up with that? Apart from the Pepsi one with Kylie Jenner and...
Yeah, that was bad. That was actually the one I was thinking of. Yeah, I can't really think of one that springs to mind, but that was the one. That was definitely the one that fills my mind.
Nancy, you're working with 2,000 businesses. As you say, they're trying to survive. Sustainability might feel like a sort of nice add-on or something. How do you work with them about understanding why it's important, but also about how they then communicate it? And are they, is this demand-led, that customers of all these, whether it's restaurants, hotels, are actually demanding it, or is there any push from the consumer's end, or is it all coming from actually thinking, oh, well, it's the right thing to do? And how would you characterize that?
Sustainable travel and sustainable growth is really at the forefront of what everyone in travel and tourism is talking about, and not because it's a business issue, but it's really, it is the right thing to do. We've had sustainable growth over the last several years. More visitors are coming every year to New York City, which we could say, hey, that's great, we're doing our jobs. However, how are we responding to that? And several destinations have seen the negative effects of over-tourism. We are not there in New York City, but we have a lot of people here. So it's no longer something you need to convince a business, especially the businesses that are impacted by tourism, that are involved in tourism. You don't need to convince them that it's a potential issue, and we all need to do whatever we can to mitigate that. So what do we do? There's a lot we can do, and as an organization, our DNA is meant to spread economic prosperity across the boroughs. So doing that is sustainable. So meaning, let's not have everyone come here in December. Let's talk about why it's great to come here in January. Let's spread the visitation out from a timeline perspective and also from a geographic perspective. We're going to be talking a lot more about the neighborhoods that in the boroughs and other outer skirts of Manhattan that folks may not necessarily know about, but they should, and they are also worthy of tourism. So making sure that the visitation and the footprint is spread, that benefits everyone, and it benefits the businesses in those areas, and they are very aware of that, and it also benefits those that are in the more of the choke point areas that don't want the negative impact of over-tourism. We've seen, the cautionary tales around the world in places like Amsterdam and Barcelona and Venice, et cetera. So we're all doing what we can to mitigate that. So all the programming that we do is with the full buy-in of our members, because again, it benefits everyone. So it's up to us to educate them on why this is important and bring them together. Rising tide lifts all boats. So when we come together, we can speak on behalf of the city and elevate their individual message that any one attraction, might do on their own. They're certainly all to varying degrees involved with their own efforts, but our ability to connect them and kind of create some scale, it does benefit everyone. So we're out there communicating. We launched our new sustainability platform around World Pride this year. When World Pride was in the early discussion phase, we're the first U.S. city to host World Pride, as you all probably know. And there was discussion of, 5-10 million people were coming for World Pride. Typically, it's 2 million. So, that's a concern. So what's going to happen when all these people descend over a period of, 4 or 5 days? What better time to talk about sustainability? So we rallied our members together, not only to make sure they were educated on who was coming, to be welcoming and show them how to be welcoming, but also to help spread the sustainability message, because we were doubling down on the amount of people that we're going to be trafficking through here. So we created a toolkit of imagery and graphics, which was a way to be visibly welcoming, but also to help them understand how they could help spread the message. So the campaign was Proudly Sustainable. We launched it in May, and to the earlier point about making the messaging succinct and in a way of connecting personally with folks, we worked with a few Broadway shows to help tell the tips and tricks in a maybe different way. We are lucky enough through our contract with the city to have an allocation of media from JC&Co. So thank you, JC&Co. It's the way we tell our story. So we created some executions with a few shows just to give some additional tips that may not get as much play as the plastic straws have been getting, in a way that might personally connect. So when you have the one sheet from the Carole King musical Beautiful, and the headline is "Take Good Care of Our Baby," maybe that connects a little bit more. And we talk about the need to recycle, or don't take all the shopping bags on your next shopping trip, and you have an image of Wicked. And there's just some creative ways that we can kind of be succinct and to the point, tell the story in a slightly more engaging way, and broaden the type of content that we produce that helps people kind of connect as a visitor. Perhaps I'm going to come in with 10 shopping bags. Guess where those are going? They're going to sit on my bed. And things to think about in maybe that new and different ways. So the content in our channels, the content in our advertising to consumers, and the content that we give to our members is all meant to educate and inspire in ways that are tangible.
Great. Thank you. Last question, then we'll open it up. But I was in Paris a while ago with the Chief Sustainability Officer of a major corporation, and she was saying, we're doing so much on sustainability, but actually when it comes to point of sale, that the customer goes in and they buy it on price and they don't actually care. They say they care, but they don't care. And actually it's deeply frustrating, because we're investing so much money and we're promoting it, we're marketing it, and actually it still isn't getting the cut through. So Ryan, maybe start with you, which is that, when it comes down to it, if companies don't think customers care, even if they're communicating, what's going on there?
That's a tricky question.
I know.
I think kind of going back to a point you were making earlier about, is there one thing that you can do, like around the kind of plastics thing? I think with making customers engage with your strategies, I think it is thinking about it's thinking about content and a customer journey. So at that point of sale, and you were talking about the theatre things and the bus ads, thinking about that top line message that resonates on a kind of a hero level, that draws people into that customer journey, and kind of you can draw them in through something that's really obvious and kind of in front of their face. But as you draw them further into that funnel, you can then start talking about other things and contextualize what you were talking about in the first place. So I think it is thinking about content strategy a bit more, and being a bit more strategic about how, at the very top of the funnel, you can afford to be comical, funny, bold, brave, but as you bring people in, you can begin to add more context, and you can begin to add more information to the message that you need to get across, to the point at which you can then kind of connect the dots, and that's where the idea of connectivity comes in as well. So, in terms of the plastic, single-use plastic here, or taking that bag to the shopping, what does that mean? Well, as you kind of come down the funnel, that's when you begin to find out through, websites and more information and hero and hub content.
But, is it a bit like sex surveys where everyone says they're doing it 3 times a week, but actually they're not? That everyone actually cares about sustainability, says they care, but actually when it comes down to it, they hardly ever do it. No, you've got to get one laugh out of a session, otherwise. So, Ryan,
I would
yes.
just jump on it and just because previously my job was a sustainability manager for IKEA in France, and I wanted just to share the leadership of that company, but it could be also Mark Spencer that we can quote, that when the customers say that we are ready to do it, but finally we don't buy the product, it's the company who have to change the offer and totally transform the offer. So, for instance, IKEA have made a choice a few years ago to say LED bulbs is a solution for the planet, for the wallets of the customers, and I don't let the choice to the customers. In my stores in IKEA, you can only buy LED bulbs because it's the way we have to do, it's the offer that we have to offer to the customers. So even you are not ready, you don't have the choice. Tomorrow, if you want a bulbs in IKEA, it will be LED. So you have to have this strong leadership and radical and bulbs, choice, editing, and transform your offer.
Okay, which is great. But just on that point, is it true that your LED light bulbs make Donald Trump's hair go orange? Is that true? I don't know if you saw that story recently where he decided not to go ahead with LED and because he said they make his hair go orange. Is that true?
On that point, and Pia could be explaining more of that, there was a key message also that we have to influence and have more sustainable lifestyle in the future, explaining that sustainability and sustainable choice is no compromise, that you can have LED bulbs without compromise for the choice, the quality of lighting, etc. You can have recycling paper and you can write on it without making a hole or something. So now you have to transform your offer with qualitative product integrating sustainability aspects.
Great.
That's possible.
So lights that make Donald Trump's hair stay the same colour. That's how we save the world. Okay, questions? Yes, thank you. Thank you for saving me there. You can just say who you are and where you're from.
Hi, my name is Keenan and I work at Johnson & Johnson. My question, this has been a really good conversation about communicating externally with consumers, but do you have any recommendations for communicating about climate change internally to employees to get them engaged? And
actually, can I add a little bit to that question, which is actually, I was speaking to someone who knows what they're talking about, evidently, and they were saying that actually companies are spending actually far more money now on their internal comms and trying to get their staff engaged than they are actually in external comms. But who can answer that question? Great.
Yeah, if you work in comms, you can get paid a lot in internal comms at the moment. It's just growing so quickly. But yeah.
We should talk about that as well.
Yeah, well, when you've got organisations, I've got a friend who works in AstraZeneca, and it's a massive global company. They've just joined actually our EV100 campaign, and as these companies become so big and they merge, then just communicating that kind of purpose of the organisation and what you're about becomes actually quite a challenge. And so, when we talk to the businesses that are joining our programs or have joined our programs, like EV100 in that case, going fully electric. It's amazing the enthusiasm from it, genuine enthusiasm from the people you're talking to. You can tell it's just not one of the day job things that they're doing, and they're changing their incentives for their employee cars as well as their delivery vehicles and other things as well, and they're really feeling like they're part of a movement. And also, I think what's nice in those kinds of programs is it's not just an individual company action. They're seeing the scale of the vehicles. That program has a footprint of over 2 million vehicles, and they can see the scale of that, and that their individual action is part of a bigger picture, which is moving the needle, which is moving markets. Salesforce, which is a partner for Climate Week, is another example there where through its RE100 member, it's committed to 100% renewable electricity, but actually it's a company that has a lot of contact with a lot of other businesses across the world, and therefore, in a way, through your business doing things as an employee, you can be part of that. So I think making the link between that global program, and then what's happening, in your business is the way forward. I think the interesting territory where we're going to have to go over the next few years is actually for companies that really want to be that have decided that they're going to be part of the full solution, to getting to net zero or to helping play their role to reduce emissions by 50% in 10 years, then actually it's going to be about, as an employee, are you going to allow your workforce to be part of it in a way that it's not just doing your bit, but actually influencing other businesses, stretching your supply chains. We've seen companies like Apple actually asking the Japanese government to up its renewables target, saying we want to do this, we want to be able to buy more renewables more easily in your country, you need to do the right thing to help us to do that. We've seen companies in Korea that want to be part of RE100 because their competitors are able to be 100% renewably powered, and they've been going to the Korean government and say, like, you need to liberalize your energy market because you've got state sanctioned, quite monopolistic type positions, quite old-fashioned type positions, and we can't do what our competitors can do. So I think that's the really interesting thing, is how do we link the sort of the dynamics of the broader scale what needs to happen with then employee pressure, and particularly see that with millennials and young people about where they want to work as well. And I think just so amazing and so interesting to see Amazon's response last week to a really, really strong employee campaign as well. So yeah,
thank you. And Nancy, you work with all multiple businesses outward facing, but how important is it to help all those employees of those companies to engage as well?
Yeah. We do member talks on a quarterly basis, and we have a membership team that is on the phone or meeting with our members every day. And we very much need to get to different folks within the organization for whatever the case may be, and not just speak to the same person. So for us, it's very important to have the right relationships and be able to connect internally. We've done meetings with Google to how to succeed in search. So we had to make sure we got to the digital folks, and it's a lot of working the phones and making sure that again we're preparing for World Pride. We're talking to the right folks there. So it's digging, it's having the right connections and relationships with our members to understand who should it be, because it's not a cookie cutter approach for every I won't say challenge, opportunity, problem. So that's on us to make sure we're getting to the decision maker within the member organization who can actually help, who is involved. And that's what we do every day. So it's not just the same person who shows up at every meeting who will come back and not really know what to do with the information.
Okay. We've got time for one more question. Okay, we've got time for two very quick questions. So we'll ask them together. Caroline.
Thank you, Caroline from Women in Business. I wonder if you can say a bit more about authenticity, because I think just intrigued about the 80% of briefs coming into agencies to deal with the plastic issue. It's hard. We would have solved the plastic issue if all of those 80% of companies asking to talk about plastics had actually done what needs to be done to stand up with authenticity and speak. And I think what really resonates with me was Alan Jope's piece around kind of woke washing, and I think that presents kind of a real risk to brands who are able to stand up with authenticity, others who are standing up without the backing, without the commitment, without the really powerful kind of lean on climate change, kind of puts the whole kind of movement at risk. So I don't know if you kind of just can reflect on the authenticity piece.
Thank you. And let's take the other question quickly, and then we'll answer them together.
Hello, I'm Emma from Decathlon. I don't work in communications, so apologies if this question's rubbish. But I kind of see that with plastic, you kind of have to address the issue as a brand, because it's the #1 question you get from like everyday customers as a retailer. So no matter if we communicate about science-based targets or renewable energy, we still get every second question is about plastics. Do you see that as like a gateway into other topics you can then communicate about, or do you see it as kind of getting lost in the noise about everything else about plastics?
Brilliant question. Okay, let's do the two. Who wants to kick off? Carol, do you want to kick off?
No, because to be honest, I'm not sure to have fully understand the last question. But
okay, we'll start off with the authenticity one.
Okay, I can start with this one. No, regarding authenticity, You were quoting a few minutes ago Unilever example. Definitely, yeah, brands have to be fully aligned with their purpose and their mission. And I don't know if you know, but Unilever also the growth of the company have drive with meaningful and sustainable living brands, and they are challenging some brand like Magnum. We said that also in English, Magnum for the ice cream. Yeah, saying that do we let Magnum in our portfolio because finally, this brand are, for the moment, no mission statement, not authenticity, not purpose. So definitely in the future, every brand and every big brand we were talking and collaborating today are saying that they are challenging their marketing teams, commercial team, to say, what is the purpose of the brand? What is the authenticity? What is the value that we bring to the society tomorrow? And I have no, I would say, no advice about that, only saying that the journey is ongoing, and if the brands are not following this expectation from the cities and from the society and citizen, they will not last in the future.
Great. And Ryan, just on the second question, because I understood it as saying, actually, if everyone's asking about plastic, then companies can't ignore that, but can they use that as a way into other issues, so that not just to get stuck, the same story about plastic, but if that's what people care about, can you use that as a way of then helping them to understand the broader problems? Was that fair? Yeah.
I think it kind of goes back to what I was talking about content strategy and using almost, I think you were talking about plastics almost kind of as a gateway drug into, maybe attach. And I think that's what really good content strategy uses. It uses something in the zeitgeist, something that people are talking about that you can hook onto. And I think the best campaigns do hook onto something that people are talking about that's relevant, that's kind of hitting that crest of the wave. And I think it's really down to the organisation to think strategically about, okay, here's an opportunity. Here is something in the zeitgeist that we can comment on, that we have a position on, that we can talk about. Now let's use our content funnel strategically to bring people in and start talking about other things and kind of increase that interconnectivity between, for example, a plastic issue and a marine issue, for example. So I think it boils down to just thinking ahead and being strategic about content.
Luke, actually, I just want to pick up on the authenticity question, because Unilever is quite interesting because the chief marketing officer was also the head of sustainability. In most companies, the chief sustainability officer has no money, is begging people for resources, and has nothing to do with the marketing who are just trying to sell as much as possible. So how big a problem is that?
Well, I mean, to be honest, I don't care whether it's the Chief Sustainability Officer or the Chief Strategy Officer or the FD that is leading the action. In some ways, it's almost more powerful when what they're doing as a business on sustainability is core to the business rather than siphoned off. I've shared an office with a Chief Sustainability Officer, and I've seen his struggle to get stuff up the agenda and so on. And I've seen it when the Finance Director really cares about something or thinks that we're going to be hit by taxes on carbon or whatever, and that's when stuff happens a lot more quickly. So I'm not so worried about that. I think the sort of authenticity thing of it is we have to make sure that we create frameworks where good positive action is shown. Unilever has done a heck of a lot, and I think are right to praise them for what they're doing and give them opportunities to put that on the platform. We had them at the opening ceremony. But then I think we need to create opportunities when those that maybe are saying nice things, but here's a call out, here's an invitation to other NGOs out there that do public campaigning. You've got Nike is a RE100 member, is committed to going 100% clean power. New Balance has just recently joined. Adidas, which is in a country where we need to move from coal power a lot more quickly, is not a member. Now, I'm not calling them out and saying Adidas are evil. I'm not saying that. I don't know. But I think it's fair enough that somebody goes out and challenges them about that. And that may not, we as the climate group will be there as a business, as an organisation, to talk to that business and engage with them positively and everything else. But this is a complex picture, and there's loads of opportunities there for numerous organisations to do really targeted things with consumer power, employee power, whatever it might be, that can help lift these businesses into different spaces.
And just make sure the camera got that. Luke said Adidas was part of the evil empire. Just to get that on the record. Great. Okay. I'm afraid we're out of time, and I want to be respectful of people's time because I've gone 5 minutes over. So, thank you for staying for the second session, but particularly thank you to the panel. So, thank you very much.